Hello, this short presentation provides more information related to the 38th and Blake legislative rezoning that is one part of implementing the overall Expanding Housing Affordability Project. The Expanding Housing Affordability Project, or EHA, will result in new requirements that ensure that as new development takes place in Denver, new affordable housing is created too. One aspect of the EHA project is to introduce height incentives across the city in mixed-use and multi-unit residential zone districts that allow buildings 3 stories or taller. The primary goal is to generate more affordable housing and more housing overall, especially in areas near transit, jobs, services, and amenities. The map at the right shows where the proposed height incentives would apply across Denver. The incentive would allow an additional 30 to 50% in height in these specific locations, ranging from approximately 1 to 2 stories up to as many as 6 or 10 stories of incentive height in the most intense districts. The 38th and Blake Station area is unique in Denver in that it already includes a height incentive system that was created as a pilot program and established in 2018. At the time, state law prevented mandatory requirements for affordable housing, so height incentives were the only tool used and could only encourage affordable outcomes. As part of the EHA project, we have examined affordable housing outcomes in this area and gathered feedback as to the success of the existing pilot program. Overall, there was a recognition that the number of affordable units produced by the incentives is lower than is needed. The level of affordability should also be deeper than what is currently required, and that affordable housing outcomes are unpredictable and confusing, especially for the surrounding community. It is also important to maintain, however, the overall development capacity of this area, given its proximity to transit and its emergence as a hub for jobs and amenities. Under the current system, maximum incentive heights allowed in this area range from 5 to 16 stories, with most areas allowing a maximum of 12 stories. The majority of projects have not provided any affordable units because, as mentioned before, there is no requirement for projects that are developed within the allowed base height. Those projects that have created affordable housing in exchange for that additional incentive height are only required to provide a very low amount available to people earning 80% of the area median income. The EHA program is proposed to change affordability outcomes significantly. First, there is a requirement for all projects of 10 units or more to provide on-site affordable housing, regardless of whether they are building within the base or incentive height limits. This will ultimately result in at least 2 to 3 times more affordable housing units than are being created under the existing system and be required to be offered at lower affordability levels. The 38th and Blake area would also no longer require custom administration and would be more consistent with other mixed-use areas in the city. To achieve these updates, the legislative rezoning is an important and necessary part of the overall EHA program. While some portions of the 38th and Blake area will need to be adjusted, most of the area will see no change in allowed base height and simply have the existing overlay removed. Maximum incentive heights will ultimately remain the same as currently allowed. This approach will be described in more detail in the following slides. So let's dig into the details of the proposed rezoning. As noted earlier, when the 38th and Blake overlay was created, height incentives were the only tool available to encourage affordable housing. This required that the base height be held lower than usual for a transit-focused location in order to make use of the incentive height more enticing. In some cases, in fact, an 11-story increase is possible. However, now that state law has changed and we can introduce a mandatory requirement through the EHA project, this low base height is no longer necessary to result in significant affordable housing outcomes. The proposed EHA incentive heights respond directly to the base zone districts and are lower than what the current overlay allows, typically only 1 to 4 stories of height increase depending on the underlying zoning for this particular area. Leaving those low base heights in place in this area would lower the overall maximum height and restrict the ability for the city to meet its growth strategy goals to focus development near transit services and amenities. Therefore, adjustments are needed to raise the base zoning in certain locations to maintain the current maximum incentive height that is allowed in this area and is recommended by our adopted plans like Blueprint Denver. The proposed rezoning would remove the existing incentive-only system and replace it with the EHA mandatory requirements and incentives. The areas with blue hatching, as seen on the right, would have the base height adjusted upward to be consistent with our adopted plans. Importantly, no additional increase to maximum incentive heights is proposed. The overall maximum height allowed in this area would remain the same as the existing system. Also important to note, this rezoning only applies to existing mixed-use districts that are in this area. It does not propose any changes to industrial zone districts like the Pepsi bottling site or any open space areas. Any future redevelopment of the industrial districts would require a separate rezoning process. Note that the majority of the rezoning area, more than 55%, would only have the existing overlay removed and not change the current base height. If we zoom into the portion of the rezoning area where a change to base height would occur, you can see that the most notable adjustment of base height from 5 stories to 12 stories is a very small area of the overall rezoning boundary. It's only 4% of the total boundary and is closest to the rail station where that increase is most supported by transit. Most adjustments of base height are much more modest, and it is very important to remember, however, that under the new EHA system, affordable housing is required to be provided on-site for all projects, regardless of whether they are within the base height or incentive height. To better understand why this rezoning is an important component of the overall EHA project, we can look at 2 before and after examples. One developed under base height and then another developed under the incentive height. This first example shows a new 8-story building with a total of 160 housing units. Under today's overlay system, since the project is within the base height of 8 stories, there is no requirement to provide affordable housing, but only payment of the city's linkage fee. Tomorrow, however, under the EHA system, even though this project is within the base height, there is still a mandatory requirement of at least 8% of units must be affordable, and they must be affordable at 60% of the area median income. This results in at least 13 additional affordable housing units being produced by this project under the EHA system, compared with 0 units under today's system. And how about a project that uses incentive height? This example shows a new 12-story project with 240 residential units. Under today's overlay, this project would result in a requirement for 9 units, or less than 4% of the total, and these units can be provided at 80% of area median income. In tomorrow's EHA system, however, this same project would generate at least 24 units, or 10% of the total, and they must be offered at the deeper affordability level of 60% AMI. In both cases, the maximum incentive height of 12 stories is maintained. So in summary, the rezoning of this area will result in more affordable housing being produced in all projects that are within the base height or incentive height, and regardless of whether that base height is adjusted as part of this rezoning. Additionally, people and families with lower incomes are served in all outcomes than they currently are under the current system. And by adjusting base heights where needed and appropriate, the rezoning can lead to more housing opportunities overall near transit and amenities. So far in this presentation, we have discussed residential projects. However, the EHA project also accommodates existing allowances for a fee-based height incentive for a commercial project in the 38th and Blake area, and also other rail transit locations across Denver. The proposed EHA regulations would allow commercial projects to pay increased linkage fees to utilize incentive height if they are in an urban center zone district that is within 1/2 mile of a rail station. The 38th and Blake overlay system also includes two other components that are important to discuss. The existing height transitions that are included near lower scale residential districts would be replaced by expanded zoning code standards for height limits when projects are near protected districts. There is also a community serving use provision in the current system that, while very positive in intent, has unfortunately been less successful in execution. There have not been any successful contracts for community serving uses executed under the current system, and this approach also presents problems over time as tenants and community needs change. Note that these types of agreements could still be included as part of a negotiated alternative under the future proposed EHA program. So hopefully this brief presentation has been helpful to explain the background, intent, and importance of the 38th and Blake legislative rezoning as part of the larger expanding housing affordability project. Please feel free to contact CPD or host staff if you have any questions. Thank you.